Back on Ed Schultz News and Commentary. Good to have you with us. Let's go right to it. The candidate from Vermont, the independent, who is leading in both Iowa and New Hampshire, Senator Bernie Sanders. Senator, good to have you with us.
Great to be with you, Ed.
Senator, I'm sure you, like millions of Americans, watched the CNN debate last night, and many people are entertained, but also profoundly, not so much entertained, but also profoundly taken by some of the tweets that you and your team put out last night from sitting on the couch, which I think is great. The first one that caught our attention was about poverty, and it reads, "Have you heard anyone use the word poverty yet? 47.7 million Americans living in poverty, no discussion." The next one, waiting. Will we hear anything about racial justice, income inequality, or making college affordable? Did the Republicans miss the mark last night, Senator?
I really think they did. Look, it goes without saying that my views are very different than theirs. But if you take a hard look at what the real issues facing the American people are, and what people are really concerned about, there was almost no discussion about them. For example, the middle class is in rapid decline, and we are seeing massive income and wealth inequality. Did you hear one word about that? We got 30 million people in this country today have no health insurance at all. Not one word about that. We have the highest rate of childhood poverty of any major country. No discussion about that. So I think, Citizens United. We have a corrupt campaign finance system. Not one suggestion that maybe we may want to overturn that disastrous Supreme Court decision. Mm-hmm. On climate change, well, they did talk about it, but what they told us is that while the scientific community is loud and clear that this is a planetary crisis, they have nothing significant to say about transforming our energy system. So,
well, the only thing they had to say was that they don't want to let the leftists and the liberals and the environmentalists destroy our economy,
right?
Which they don't understand the dynamic of how many jobs shifting attention to the climate would actually create in this country. In the meantime, Marco Rubio is in total denial while Miami continues to be underwater and threatened as a city. But you're right. Nothing about income inequality, nothing about social justice or race. Trade and jobs never got mentioned other than they think that they can create them. And on a day where it was announced that 9 million people have got health care, all they could talk about was repealing it.
Absolutely right. And the other thing, I mean, again, beyond belief, I just don't know how dumb they think the American people are that they can get away with this. All of the problems facing this country are attributable to Barack Obama. They forgot to mention that when Bush left office, we were hemorrhaging 800,000 jobs a month. Our financial system was on the verge of collapse, and we were running a $1.4 trillion deficit. Somehow or another, Ed, it seems to have skipped their mind that was the reality when Obama came to office.
Well, Senator, the backdrop of that is the Reagan Library, and, of course, the sacred commandment of the Republicans is don't rip into another Republican. And I think that had a lot to do with it. In fact, Huckabee was just absolutely just showering comments over how wonderful the whole crew was last night. The fact is that they're out of touch. They can't go to war fast enough. Now, I want to ask you a direct question. If you're president with the dynamic that's playing out right now with Russia, would you go face-to-face with Vladimir Putin?
Look, I think what you need to do is to bring the world together. Do I think that it is important for there to be real dialogue with Russia to understand that their aggressive behavior is unacceptable? Absolutely. But this is what I do believe, and it's a lesson that we have got to learn from the disastrous war in Iraq. We need coalition politics. We need to bring countries around the world together to put pressure on Russia and any other aggressive nation. But as I have said many, many times, Ed, war should be the last resort of a major and great country like ours, not the first response.
Okay, so we did bring the world together in the P5+1 with the agreement with the Iranians, and all of them want to trash the deal. Your thoughts?
Well, you're right. Every single one of them, well, I would say what Kasich was not for totally trashing it, but, he was against it. That's the perfect example of what I'm talking about. Implicit in what all of them are saying, or they didn't use the word war, if you're going to tear to shreds, I think Ted Cruz's language, this agreement, what are your options? What options remain if you believe, as most of us believe, that Iran should not get a nuclear weapon if you're going to tear to shreds the agreement that prevents them from getting a weapon, but a nuclear weapon, but does it in a way that does not go to war, what are your options that are left? And the answer is war. And I cannot believe, and I think it is enormously troubling, that after the disastrous war in Iraq, that these guys still see war as the only approach to solving international problems. And that is just a very dangerous attitude.
So how would you capsulize the debate? An out-of-touch night for America?
I think really, number one, if you sit down and you ask the American people what the issues are of most concern to them, these guys, by and large, did not talk about them. And when they did talk about them, they were way out of touch. For example, immigration is an important issue. Happens that most Americans think in one way or another there should be a path toward citizenship for the 11 million undocumented people. Not these guys, not one of them up there on the stage.
Senator, from maybe a comical perspective, did you find yourself talking to the TV last night?
I tell you what, I honestly found. I was watching this thing and I was tweeting for 2.5 hours, and I was feeling more and more drained. The energy, I was trying to pay attention. It did not make a whole lot of sense to me. The energy was just flowing out of my body. I was exhausted. And finally, I gave up. At the end of 2.5 hours, I said, this is it. I'm out of here. It was not, it's one thing to have disagreements with people. And that's called democracy.
Yeah.
But these guys are so out of touch, I think, with where the American people are coming from that it was really painful to watch.
Okay, you say social justice. I want to say race relations. They act as if there's no issues here whatsoever.
Did you hear one word of that last night?
No, I didn't. And I think that has been one of the most prominent stories that's out there. Nothing about Black Lives Matter. Not that that's the driving force, but it is a big story, but also just the underpinning and the foundation of the crumbling of society that we've seen, such things that have happened with police shootings and what unfolded in Ferguson. It's almost like it was just swifted under the table as not a pressing question. Nothing about education of what we really need to do to make America great again, so to speak, Mr. Trump. All right, now, I do want to talk about your campaign and give you a chance. In the most recent poll, you received 49% of support among registered independents and new voters compared to Clinton's 26%. I think that's the most striking number that's been out there so far about your campaign. Your thoughts?
Well, thanks for noticing that. I think a lot of media does not notice it. Here is the point. The point is that if we are going to win this election, not only the White House, but retake the United States Senate, do well in the House, get governor's seats back, clearly we need a level of enthusiasm and energy all across this country, which currently does not exist within the Democratic Party. That's the simple truth.
So are you bringing new people to the process?
Ed, absolutely. I mean, just go with me to any of our large rallies. The majority of the people there are young people, and I'm very proud of that. So I think we are bringing new energy and excitement into the political process. That means a larger voter turnout. That means we win in November.
Senator, there isn't one poll out there yet by any of the mainstream media, any of the corporate media, that has you questioned head-to-head against Republicans. Your reaction to that?
Well, there were a few a while back, but they seem to have stopped it. I found that interesting, and I'm glad you picked up on it. Some of the polls way back when had me winning, defeating most of the Republican candidates, and sometimes 2 out of 3. I think there's a reluctance on the part of some corporate media maybe to show that a Bernie Sanders can take on and defeat the major Republican candidates, and I think that is the case. But let's also add, when we talk about the campaign, that what polls also tell us, which I believe to be true, is you got 25, 30, 35% of the American people who don't know who Bernie Sanders is or what he stands for. And as we get out around the country and more people know that we are fighting for the middle class, are prepared to take on the billionaire class, I think our strength is only going to grow.
And finally, Senator, your response to Jeb Bush last night saying that George Bush kept us safe. It's my recollection we got hit on their watch.
That's right. No, absolutely, God. I mean, yes, I certainly agree with that. But in general, not only did 9/11 occur on their watch, but they took us into Iraq, which will go down in history, I think. as one of the most disastrous foreign policy blunders in the history of the United States of America. Sad to say.
Senator Bernie Sanders on Ed Schultz News and Commentary. Senator, thanks for your time. Keep up the fight.
All right, you too, Ed. Take care. Bye-bye.
Yes, sir.